Live sound check number 1, clerk's laptop.
I hear you.
That's a good sign. I'm watching us on the city's website. I don't hear anything though. Yeah. The delay is really long.
Live sound check, presenter's laptop.
Yeah.
Councilor Marula, how are you?
Councilor Clark, I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm always doing well,
Excellent.
even when I'm not.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. If the sun were out, it'd be a lot better for everybody.
Oh, amen.
Live sound check number 2, clerk's laptop.
For me, I've got both my microphones on.
Yeah, they can get pretty loud, Tom.
That's a common theme I hear from my friends who are like you, grandparents.
Yeah.
My-
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly and/or visually recording this meeting. All electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during the committee's meeting. I will do a roll call. Councillor Clark,
I am enthusiastically here.
great. Councillor Jackson,
Here,
Councillor Marula,
Present.
Councillor Nan,
Good afternoon, I'm present, thank you.
and Councillor Whitehead. It's not here? Okay, Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are several changes to the agenda. We have a number of new communications items. We have item 5.3, added correspondence to respecting temporary emergency shelter. 5.3H from Damon Ju, 5.3I from Stephen Buston and Katsui Suzuki. Item 5.3J from Pam Summers, 5.3K from Karen Bradbury of Rosart Dental Laboratory Services, Inc., 5.3L from Nicole Rosart, 5.3M from Carmen Orlandis, 5.3N from Peter Scott, 5.30 from Michelle Chu, 5.3P from Damon Ju, and 5.3Q from Bruce Craig. Those are all to be received. Then we have a new item 5.4, correspondence respecting research on homelessness and encampments. 5.4A from James Dunn from the Department of Health, Aging and Society and the Faculty of Social Sciences at McMaster University. We also have 5.4B from Mary Vaccaro from the School of Social Work in the Faculty of Social Sciences at McMaster University. Those are also to be received. And then we have 5.5, correspondence respecting encampments, 5.5A from Taylor Chin, and 5.5B from Brianne Williams.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Nan and Councillor Jackson. Is there any discussion on the agenda as amended? I see none. We will require an electronic vote. Please indicate your vote now, as soon as it comes up. And that was pretty quick. Thank you. And it passed. Okay, declaration of interest. Are there any declaration of interest? I see none. Those who have, okay. Approval of the minutes of previous meeting. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of August 17th, 2020 agenda? Councillor Nan and Councillor Clark.
Okay.
Is there any discussion on approval of the minutes? I see none. We require electronic vote. Please indicate your vote now, and it's up already. Very efficient. Okay, the motion is, Councillor Nan?
It's submitted.
Okay, thank you. And the motion carried. Communication items. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve correspondent items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, A and Q, and 5.4, A and B as 5.5, A and B. As recommended. Can I have Hoover, Councillor Urula, and Councillor Jackson. Is there any discussion on any of the communication items? I see none. We will require an electronic vote. Please indicate your vote now. Oh, Councillor Nan, sorry about that. We didn't.
No
Councillor
worries.
Nan.
Thank you through the chair. No worries. I was trying to indicate using eScribe. On the correspondences as they relate to the temporary emergency shelter that is coming into Ward 3, I just wanted to take a minute, if I could, prior to us moving to receive these correspondences, to address some of the concerns that are expressed in the correspondences, if I may. I want to start off by saying thank you to the residents who have written in. The area in the Stinson community moving north to Lansdowne are definitely facing an overconcentration of issues that have been highlighted in these correspondences. So I wanted to just say, yes, I totally agree. And they are all valid concerns, specifically in terms of the increased activity of illegal drug sales, increased perception of those suffering with addictions, the increase of perception of those who are suffering mental illnesses or mental health challenges, statistically an increase in the rent, an increase in the price of homes, an increased number of people who've been displaced in that neighborhood, as well as an increased need for supportive and affordable housing in the neighborhoods spanning Stinson to Lansdale. Also wanted to acknowledge the historical legacy of an overconcentration of residential care facilities in this portion of Ward 3, as well as the concerns that are being expressed in these correspondences as they refer to the performance of operators of those RCFs. I also want to appreciate that the residents are understanding that we have a moral obligation as a municipality in COVID-19 to take care of those who have been made most marginalized. However, I want to address the claims that are in these correspondences that say the city deliberately or maliciously chose to keep information from the residents as a result of an emergency decision that we needed to make as a city system to ensure that we had a temporary shelter in place in a surge capacity to ensure that those who are facing homelessness had a safe shelter to go to during the day, as well as to shelter over the night. So I would like to request, if I could at this time, to have staff comment on the crux of the issues that come forward in this correspondence. Just to give a little bit of a timeline perspective, the first meeting I had with staff when I was informed that this temporary shelter was coming into place was in early July. And it was during this meeting that I raised the need for a community information session, knowing that we would anticipate some concerns and valid ones being expressed by the community and those residents who would be living as neighbors to the facility. And that within that month period of time, we had set the date of August 11th for a community information session, and we promoted that community information session would take place as of July 31st. My colleagues may remember this, as I did reference it multiple times, not only through this committee, but also through General Issues Committee and our council meetings as well. I want to acknowledge that these kinds of decisions in an emergency setting have a very rapid nature to decision making, but that fundamentally there is a core principle as a service provider, but also as a municipality that we are responding to. And if I could at this time, either turn to General Manager Johnson or Director John to comment on the procedures of determining the location for the temporary shelter.
Okay, thank you for that. And General Manager Johnson?
Through the chair to the councillor.
It's
No problem,
it's
councillor.
Edward?
It is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I just did want to reiterate that the timelines raised by the councillor are correct. As everybody can appreciate, we were still are in this emergency planning mode. The decisions that were needed to be made had to be made in very short order. We had a number of pressures going on, and through that search, we did have to reach out to our partners to establish capacity and ability to provide this additional surge shelter to ensure that we maintain the enhanced capacities that we had created through COVID, recognizing once again the additional pressures that the pandemic had placed on our homelessness serving system. So, it was a very rapid decision-making process. We did evaluate a number of sites, and this was the site that was most effective. It does have a history of providing similar type services. It required very few interior changes to accommodate this and certainly had the space. We've also been in a lot of discussion with the operator, and we did attend that meeting with the public, and were able to certainly fine tune some of those aspects that were raised by the community. I absolutely do empathize and sympathize with the community in terms of a number of the points raised, particularly the concentration. And as the council raised, we are looking at that piece from an RCF process, both in terms of their operation, but also from our overall plan, being more intentional in terms of that concentration of services, where they exist, and certainly trying to make sure that throughout the city we have a more equitable and dispersed provision of services throughout the municipality.
Thank you. Councillor
appreciate-
Nan.
Thank you. I appreciate the response, Director John. I also want to reiterate that with the advantage of having the community information session so early on in the process, from the timeline reality of July through August, and then ramping up renovations in the facility for a September opening, that within that time frame, by having the community information session, our operator for the temporary shelter, Good Shepherd, has made it clear that many of the points that were raised during that community meeting that had nearly 50 people attend virtually have been built into the operations plan and built into the opening plan. So I wanted to thank all the residents who did participate in that information session. Again, thank you to the residents for writing in your correspondences. It's critical that residents have their voices, and again, sympathetic and understanding the validity of concerns, but the challenge is upon us as a municipality to ensure that we are providing the provisions that are needed for those who are less fortunate and made more vulnerable as a result of this pandemic. Thank you for the opportunity and the time.
Thank you, Councillor Nan. I'm sure your correspondent really appreciate your explanation, and Edward John, thank you as well. All right, if there's no more discussion, we will require an electronic vote. Please indicate your vote now. Okay, and it passes. Okay, delegation. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation request 5.1 for today's meeting? Councillor Morella and Councillor Clark, thank you. Is there any discussions on the delegation request? Okay, I see none. We will require electronic vote. Please indicate. Councillor Clark? Okay, and it is carried. Consent items. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive consent item 6.1 as presented? Councillor Jackson and Councillor Nan, thank you. Is there any discussion or any of the consent items? I see none. We will require electronic vote. Please indicate now. And here it is. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to written or oral delegations. Item 8. We are now turning to the delegation. Committee members are reminded that in order to request to speak on the delegation, you must click on the delegate's name under item 6 on the agenda in the eScribe. At this time, I would like to call Scott Ians to delegate respecting proposal for affordable housing for the homeless. Scott, please turn on your camera. The clerk will unmute your microphone and you have 5 minutes. Thank you. Scott?
Good afternoon. My name is
afternoon.
Scott Innes. I'm a resident of Ward 1. And first of all, I'd like to thank the chair and the members of this committee for listening to this idea. I'd also like to thank Councillor Wilson's office and Jeff Nevin of Indwell for their support and ideas. This proposal is to build a series of small walk-up apartments across the city. Each apartment with two or three stories, depending on the configuration of the lot, and have about 16 units, 16 bachelor units. Each bachelor unit would be about 280 square feet or 300 square feet, and include a bathroom with a shower, kitchenette facilities, room for a table and chairs, and room for a double bed. I've checked with a very experienced construction manager, and the cost of these units would be about $60,000 or less. We're proposing to rent these units for $500 a month, which is affordable to people receiving both social services and disability payments. The combination of the cost of construction and the value of the rent will yield a cap rate or a gross revenue to investment of about 9%, which will be modestly appealing to investors and provide a small return. This will allow the project to be financed, as most projects are in the private sector, with a mortgage and a down payment. We are asking that the city get involved in 3 significant ways. First of all, it is proposed that these apartments be built on city-owned vacant lots that would be leased to the project at a nominal rate. The second would be that the city would waive parking requirements because most homeless people don't have vehicles. And the third would be that you should understand that realty taxes would not likely be applied to the project because it would be on city leased land and would be aimed at affordable housing. In a discussion with Jeff Nevin, we talked about how the private sector could fit in. These buildings are small and will not be staffed, so they're aimed at people who are reasonably capable of functioning, but just need a good, cheap place to live. So this concept is not in competition with the consortium's ideas on affordable housing, but is a direct supplement to that and will stretch the dollars further. What are the benefits to the city? First of all, this is a Hamilton-made solution. No approval by upper levels of government, no funds required from senior levels of government. Secondly, the apartments will be distributed across the city as lots are made available. So the concentration impact that Councillor Mann talked about is diluted. Because the buildings are small, the impact of a small group of tenants is relatively less. Because the buildings are simple and effective to build, the buildings need to be done quickly, and we can get this rental capacity up on the market in an expedient manner. The benefits for the neighborhood are that these small buildings fit into a typical residential neighborhood because they're 2 or 3 stories, and they sit on a fairly standard residential lot, anywhere between 35 to 50 feet wide and 100 feet deep. And the benefits to the homeless are wonderful. As you all know, a fixed address gives people the opportunity to obtain benefits, to get a quiet bed to sleep in, a door to lock so their belongings are secure, and a place to store food and to cook simple meals. So the cooperation of the city that we're looking for with regards to the long-term lease of the land, the waiving of the parking requirements, and of course I would hope for your assistance in presenting this idea both to council and in cooperation with the planning committee. And that's it.
Wow. Thank you, Scott. We have a few questions from our committee. So the first one is Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Scott. One of the increasing demands in the city for affordable housing is seniors. I know in Ward 9, there's a huge demand for seniors apartments, affordable apartments, and there aren't any. And there aren't any being built. They're building these large retirement facilities that can charge anywhere from $2,000 a unit to $6,000 a unit. And that's not helping the average senior who doesn't have that kind of money. Would your proposal or could your proposal be vamped in a manner that it would provide housing for seniors?
Absolutely. Depending on the lot size, the first level of the building could be made on the ground floor, so it's accessible to those people with limited mobility. And the washroom could be expanded so you could get a walker or a wheelchair into the washroom. And that way we could accommodate people that have got less mobility than the younger ones. My hair is white too.
Yeah, mine's going there too. Oddly, since I joined council, but anyways, that's another story. Can I ask another question, Madam Chair, with regards to would these apartment complexes or the organization that develops these apartment complexes, would they be a not-for-profit organization or a private developer who, like, I'm trying to understand who would be doing this work?
Basically, I'm going to be planning on assuming the coordinator role, and it would be for profit because the mortgage has to be paid and investors would like some return on their money. But you're not going to get rich renting out apartments at $500 a month, so the returns would be modest, but there would have to be a profit. So it would be for profit, but it would be on leased city land, which is why I mentioned that we would look for relief from realty taxes, even though it would be a for-profit venture.
So based on that scenario, Scott, then would I be safe in assuming that the investors are looking at the land value over the timeline of the development for their profit? Because they're not going to be making profit on the rent that's being charged. So I'm assuming it would be on the increase in the land over time.
Actually, you can make a profit on the rent because the cost of the units is relatively modest and the cost of interest is very low. So they actually would make a modest profit on the rental. Don't forget the land is still owned by the city, so there's no profit to be gained there.
Under your scenario where it would be leased to,
Correct.
to the proponent.
You know,
Okay.
and to purchase a lot in the city is incredibly expensive and would add dramatically to the capital cost. The city has a number of vacant lots, so what we're doing is utilizing the capacity of the existing assets that the city already has.
So I'm intrigued by the proposal, but I have to say, in my time in public life, I've not seen any private proponents come forward to offer to build affordable housing. It tends to be the not-for-profit and the charity groups that do it, but not. I don't know of any developer that's proposed to build affordable apartments at $500 a unit.
That's why Jeff Nevin was so delighted that I saw a way for the private sector to step forward. And I've talked to a number of people in construction. I've got connections with people in the property management business, and I think it's doable.
Okay, thank you, Scott, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Ennis, I appreciate very much you coming forward, wanting to help in whatever way you can with your creative proposal to get people very, very affordable housing. However, I just have a series of curiosities. On your request to speak sheet, by the way, as a delegation, it says here, will you be requesting funds from the city? And you wrote down no. And yet, if I'm listening carefully, you're either going to need funds or land from the city, correct?
We would look to have vacant city land leased to us. So that really isn't a cash transfer. That's a lease of assets. And in many cases, the city has had vacant land that's been vacant for quite a while.
Okay, so I guess we're stretching the definition of the word funds then. You do need land though from the city, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe we need to speak to the clerks about how we would answer that, LC Bates, in the future. I'm trying to understand, Mr. Innes, and very respectfully, what is your background, please? Because all I see here is your address on Whitten Road.
Okay. I'm a long-term resident in Ward 1. I'm a retired professional engineer, and I've been involved in the ward in a fairly active way, both in the Institute Westville Community Association and on the board of the President's Advisory Commission on McMaster. So I've been active in the neighborhood, and I've got an engineering and construction, not construction management, but a project management background.
So thank you for that. So would you be, so hypothetically, if this has any legs at all, and we, Madam Chair, if we're going to do anything, we need to definitely flush this out with Director Edward John, I would suggest, and the planning department to start from today if we're going to do anything. At least that's all I would support, just an initial exploration. But are you basically, Mr. Innes, then, if this has any legs, you would be the agent, if you will? You would be the front person, the coordinator for these interested developers, through you, Madam Chair Pauls?
I guess my role is as a facilitator. I would not. I have talked to one philanthropist that's been quite active in the community, and I think with, again, with the right scenario, I think we could get seed capital fairly readily for design. And I'm not going to be the person involved in the long run. That will be people that are in the property management and property investment business. This is not about my private gain. This is about trying to bring people together to create a solution.
I see. And just based on what you proposed, Madam Chair, my last question, 16 units, I guess, talking to your developer friends or the philanthropists you're mentioning, I guess there's some economies of scale, Madam Chair Pauls, that 16 units would be a minimum in these 2 or 3 story buildings. Otherwise, it wouldn't be either beneficial, affordable, or it wouldn't be worth building. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would envisage that it could go as small as 12 or 14 units, but yes, it'd have to be somewhere in that range in terms of, to make the building cost effective to build. You're trying to, from a construction point of view, you're trying to hit a sweet spot in building costs. The high-rise apartments are extremely expensive to build. They've got elevators and fancy pumping systems and all kinds of other services in the building that are not present in the 2 or 3 story building. That's why houses are quite affordable compared to high-rise condominiums.
Okay, all right. And again, you wouldn't expect the city to collect any taxes on this because then it would take away from the affordability.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Innes, I appreciate the sincerity of your replies. Madam Chair, I still have a number of questions on this. I'm not trying to discourage someone trying to help the homeless situation in our city, but I need a lot more answers and a good full review from our staff if this is going to be more than just being received today. Thank you, Madam Chair Pauls.
Thank you. Okay, we have Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Scott, for coming in today and for bringing your heart to the table in terms of trying to find a solution to house our homeless and to try and do so in a way by increasing rental affordability at a rate of $500 a month in the city. Scott, in the work that you were doing in leading up to this idea, have you had an opportunity at all to connect with any of the social housing providers who have come forward to our committee and council to aim for 3,000 units in 3 years? Because as you may appreciate, that initiative has been endorsed by council to do some of the very similar things that you're talking about, but to do it very deliberately in a nonprofit format, looking at vacant properties and the city's real estate as part of the levers in order to enable landing those builds that collaborative is aiming towards. Have you had any opportunity to connect with any of the nonprofit housing providers?
Indeed, I spent quite a while talking with Jeff Nevin over at Indwell, and we had a very extensive discussion. He really felt that this concept was complementary. It may well be that we end up folding this idea into his initiative or into the general initiative. The difference is here that the 3,000 units were to do those. They were looking for something over $1 billion, as I understand, which is an enormous sum of money. Whereas what I'm doing is trying to use existing assets and conserve the city's cash in a time that it is really, facing a lot of challenges financially.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So maybe, Madam Chair, through you, the only thing that I would be prepared to do at this point with the information that we have available in front of us is perhaps work through staff to connect Mr. Ennis to the Hamilton is Home Coalition and see if there may be a synergy there in ideas and potentially an opportunity to lift up the implementation plan that that coalition is working towards. There is some synergy here, and perhaps it might be most appropriate given the asks that are on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, second time speaker, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one follow-up question. So in reading your report, you're suggesting that you could build these units, $50,000 per unit would build these units. Is that what I read?
I said under 60, actually. Sorry.
Pardon me?
I said under 60,000.
So under 60,000. And the coalition that is putting forth the proposal to the feds, their suggestion is that it's the units would cost $375,000 per unit. That's quite a disparity.
It's enormous.
Do you have any idea why? Like, how would you explain that to a policy maker like me? Why there would be such a difference between what you're proposing and what the Housing Coalition is proposing?
Because what they're doing is a totally different kind of building. They're aiming their building proposal at staff buildings for people that need a lot of support. So there's a lot of common areas and support areas. In order to justify the amount of staff and support that's needed, you end up with a large building. Jeff identifies that the minimum number of clients that he wants to put into a building is around 60, and he'd like to see go as high as 120. So you end up with big buildings with elevators, all kinds of other services. This is expensive construction. They're all one-off designs with extensive design costs. I assume they're buying the land. So all of these add enormously to the costs. The cost of the buildings that I'm proposing would almost double if we had to do a one-off type design approach and buy the land. So you can see how very rapidly the costs escalate. Jeff estimated that his cost of construction was around $375 a square foot for these high-rise elevator buildings. Whereas what we're seeing is that we can build these less expensive buildings in the sweet spot, the optimal point for construction, at somewhere around $175 a square foot. So yes, there's an enormous difference, and it's because of the size and configuration of the buildings and the absence of common space. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, it does. A supplementary question, Chair Pauls. Scott, have you had any conversations with city staff, with Mr. Johnson or Mr. Johns?
I have not. I was talking with Councillor Wilson's office, and they suggested that I come to you folks first. So there we are. And so you're my first sort of group of people that I've met from City Hall on this matter.
So my suggestion would be, Madam Chair, that before we introduce Scott to the coalition, that we make sure that he sits down with staff so that they can ask him lots of questions and get a better understanding on what the proposal is and go from there. Thank you for your time today, sir. Thank you for coming forward.
I wanted to thank everybody for that, and I'd be delighted to meet with staff.
That would be great. Can I pass the chair to Councillor Nan? I would like to ask you, you first mentioned that this is for profit, right? And it's not very much, you said, and we don't need the federal or the province. And of course, you talked to Jeff Nevin, and I know Jeff very well. Do you realize some of his apartments are apartments that are support apartments? They need extra help for the people that live there?
Yes,
And you know that. So yours would be an individual apartment for what type of apartments you're describing? They're
so
small?
I'm describing small, call it 16-unit apartments, and they'd be bachelor apartments. But
Right.
they still have their own food handling and food storage, a fridge and a microwave. They still have a shower and a sink, but they would not have support facilities on site.
Right.
And so they'd be simple buildings, you know, sort of be construction like in your house with 2x6s in the walls and so on. So this is not concrete construction and elevators.
Okay. Also, have you talked to any other nonprofit providers? Because I know there's some others that do not have support system. They're just small apartments as well. Or did you just talk to Jeff?
Actually, I've talked, and I want to keep their names private, but I've talked to a couple of people that are in the property management business. And I'm looking for experience from people who know how to, because these will not be staffed, so we will not be able to accommodate people with high needs.
Right.
So this is not all about people with high needs. This is about accommodating people that basically need an inexpensive place to live. And as Councillor Clark suggested, we certainly could accommodate seniors if they had some mobility issues, but not if they were high needs.
And will you be willing to work with the nonprofit organization to get ideas and all that as well?
Absolutely. You have to understand that some of the people that I've talked to this point have been True City, which I'm sure you're aware of them. They're a group of active churches in the lower city. And I'm an elder with St. Cuthbert's Presbyterian, and I've been involved in their outreach group. I see a strong correlation between helping the homeless to integrate and be housed and the work that was done by True City in helping to integrate the refugees. It's exactly parallel activities, and it's something that fits nicely into that mandate.
Thank you, Scott. Very interesting, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Okay, I'll take the chair back, and we will need a vote on the presentation, and
Madam Chair, just a quick question. There were three separate ideas or potential direction. I just wanted to get clear about what we're voting on right now. Is it simply to receive the delegation, or was there some supplementary in terms of conversation with staff?
well, I have here, we're just going to receive the delegation, 7.1. So that's what we're voting on. Did I have a mover and a seconder? I have a mover and a seconder? Okay. Who would move it for me? Councillor Nan and Councillor Jackson? You okay with that?
This is just to receive the presentation.
Okay. This is just to receive the presentation. All right? Okay. So now we'll vote on the presentation to receive it.
Bear with me for 1 second. Now, if one of the members wants to put forward a draft direction, then that's a different story. We would vote on that again.
Would anybody want to put a suggestion to staff, or are we vote on receiving it? Just receive it? Can they hear me?
You should be able to.
Okay, we'll vote on just receiving the delegation then.
So can I suggest that We
Yes.
received the delegation and we asked staff to the delegate to get more information. We don't,
Okay.
it's challenging for us to receive a presentation like this. We have no history with the gentleman. We
Right.
have no idea of his capabilities. I'm not disparaging his proposal, but if we want to exercise some due diligence, we would have our staff meet with him to ascertain whether or not what he's proposing actually is viable. Thank you.
That's okay. So we will refer this to staff then, and we will vote on that. Clark?
Can you give me a moment, please?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I think what Councillor Clark is getting at is that maybe Mr. Innes will need to contact staff to talk about this, and that be a recommendation to the delegate rather than a direction to staff to reach out to Mr. Innes. Does that work for the members? Paul, do you want to ring in on that?
Would you, General Manager Paul Johnson, would you like to comment on that?
So through the chair, I think Councillor Clark just wanted to clarify that, and then I can certainly respond.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine either way. At the end of the day, I think Mr. Johns needs to meet with this gentleman to ascertain exactly what's possible.
And so through the chair, I was going to say we're happy to make that connection. And Edward and I did have a conversation prior to the meeting just about this possibility. So to sit down and look at the pro forma a little bit to see where it's at, and then we can also have that discussion about what's happening with those broader initiatives like Hamilton is Home, and see if there's a connection point there. So we're happy to make that, whether it's proactively, retroactively. I mean, I think we have the contact information for Mr. Innes as part of the delegation. So why don't I suggest for ease of everyone here that Edward John and his team will reach out to you, Mr. Innes, and set up a time just to chat more about the proposal, and we're happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And thank you again, Scott. Thank you. Okay, and we
Okay, so what we've got now is we're in the middle of a vote to receive the delegation, and that hasn't changed from Paul's input there.
Okay.
So we're just waiting for Councillor Clark on that.
Councillor Clark, did you vote on receiving the information?
Yes, and I'm fine with receiving it, and with Mr. Johnson's statement that they'll meet with Mr. Innes. We don't need to make any further direction.
Okay. Thank you, and I see it carried. We're going to move on to discussion items. May I please have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor? Councillor Jackson and Councillor Nan. Thank you. Is there any discussions on the items? I see there's none. We will require e-vote. Please indicate your vote.
To be clear, which item are we voting on?
We are voting 10.1.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Child and care and early years funding enhancement. We're on this. Okay. Councillor Nan, did you vote? Okay. Okay, the motion was carried. Okay, 10.2, emergency shelter service for single homeless women. May I please have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor? Councillor Nan and Councillor Sam Marilla. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this item? I see none, so we will, oh, Councillor Nan, I didn't bring it up. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nan.
Thank you through the chair. I think I'm having some difficulty with eScribe. I am hitting the microphone, but it doesn't seem to be indicating on the other end. So I apologize. I did also I'd hoped that we would get a little bit of an update from staff prior to the vote on the last one, although it's good news in terms of funding for childcare enhancements. It's also in many ways, it's just something that we need to act on anyway. But on this item, I was wondering if staff could provide an overview, as many residents in Ward 3 as well as members in the housing sector who've been concerned about the lack of spaces for women specifically in the shelter system are eager to hear the news that's inside this report and give the opportunity to Director John, please.
Director John.
Thank you, and through the chair to the councillor. So as reviewed in the report, this was information we got wind of early in the year. It seems like a very long time ago now, back in February, pre-COVID, about the closure of Mountain View and the 15 spaces that were then available at that facility. Obviously, COVID occurred, and we were able to actually talk with our partners to establish some extensions to those timelines to allow them to operate until the end of this month now occurring. That allowed us to project and propose some options for fulfilling that base funding for similar or additional capacities in the system. We have had 3 proposals brought forward through WIPIC committee. They were recommended to us and is forming part of the appendix. As part of that process, we reviewed those recommendations and have decided to choose the interim measure, which is to accommodate those 15 persons within an enhanced hotel provision until such time as we can actually do a call for applications to review what proposals out there can actually address some of that need that we often hear at this committee, and look for solutions not only to the 15 beds, but a potential for an increase in that capacity subject to that funding, which we would then ultimately bring back to this committee.
So Director John, if I heard that correctly through the chair, our interim solution is to increase the allotment of hotels to act specifically to address the shortage created by the closure with Mountain View, and that the intention of the municipality is to find a way to move towards open call to find more permanent solutions?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct. We will be positioning that call for applications very soon, and we are looking for some flexibility in terms of the proposals coming forward, recognizing that we would like some potential innovation as well as opportunity to discuss and look at additional capacities in the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will require a e-vote to receive the report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for clarification. So when I'm reading the report on page 3, I guess it would be page 2 of 3 and 3 of 3, the very last part of it talks about the fiscal period of April 2020 to March 2021, indicates 520,000 was allocated to Mountain View from CHPI base funding. Given the closure in September, 260,000 has been committed to Mountain View, with another 260,000 available for the period from October to March of 2021. So where's the money going? Like, how is it being utilized? I'm trying to understand that.
So through the chair to the councillor, so the base funding for the fiscal year is the 540,000. Obviously, the prorated fee to take us to the end of September is that which will be allotted to Mountain View. We then have the remainder of that funding to assist us with that interim solution, and at which time we will also be conducting that call for applications process and return then to this committee with the outcome, and obviously any required enhancements through that CHPI funding will be presented at that time.
So the fiscal period of April 2020 to March 21, whose fiscal period is that?
So through the chair to the councillor, so that is the fiscal period for homelessness prevention initiative funding. We have up to the March of the next year in which to use those funds, at which point any unused funds are returned.
Thank you. That makes sense to me now. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Edward. And we have Councillor Jackson.
Madam Chair, I was just picking up on what Councillor Nan had wanted to hopefully have for public consumption. After we deal with 10.2, even though it's unorthodox but not unprecedented, could we maybe get a comment from staff on the wonderful good news story of the childcare from 10.1, even though we voted on, and I sense Councillor Nan, who's been intimately involved, would love to make a statement as well. I leave that for your decision. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Sure. We will, should we finish this vote? Okay,
Yes.
we're going to vote to receive the report, and then we'll go back to 10.1. Okay, so please indicate. Okay, and that carried. General Manager Paul Johnson, can you elaborate on 10.1?
So through the chair, I'm going to introduce Brenda Bax to you. Brenda is a manager within our Children's Services and Neighborhood Development Division and handles the operations of our children's services and childcare programs. She can provide just a little bit of an overview, and I do want to thank her colleague Jessica Chase, and of course Grace, who is their director for their work. Most of these folks are also being redeployed to do other things during COVID, and they are keeping their hand in ensuring that our childcare system functions extremely well in our early years system, but also helping us out in a variety of capacities. So I get emails from Brenda Bax on a variety of things, some of which are not with her normal job title, but in this case, she is the one who handles a lot of our operations with our childcare providers, and I'll ask her just to provide a bit of an overview as to what we have here, which is some good news, our continued investment by senior levels of government to help us with our childcare concerns in this community.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And I think everyone has the report, so we are pleased on the investment, 100% dollars coming, 7.5 million, and that is to work with our childcare community to continue to safely reopen and operate high-quality childcare for the time frame of September to December 2020. As everyone knows, we've been working very closely with our childcare community, our local public health, and our colleagues across the province, to be honest, to strategize, develop best practice, and to support early childhood educators and the community to safely reopen. And we've been keeping in regular contact with them, doing regular FAQs, connecting weekly with our local public health, answering any questions to see what we can do to support. The money will go to support operators because they have enhanced staffing requirements related to screening, related to cleaning, related to additional personal protective equipment. And they're working with families that were enrolled at the time of the provincial order to close in March to see if those families are interested in enrolling those children back in, and then moving forward with enrolling and welcoming new children to their program. So it is a good news story all the way around, and we're well served and well connected in our community, and work with a bunch of wonderful early learning and childcare operators. Does any counselors have any specific questions that I might not have covered in my overview through you to the chair?
This is good news. So any Councillor Clark?
Just
Oh,
quick
go ahead.
question. One quick question that I'm sure residents in my community may be asking me. So does this 7.5 million result in additional childcare spaces, or it just keeps what we have in line with the COVID precautions?
That's a great question, Councillor. Through you to the chair, it is to support the existing childcare community in their licensed spaces. If earlier in July, as part of Hamilton Reopens, we were slowly reopening, Ministry had set some specific guidelines around smaller cohorts of children, and that's how the system started to open up into July. We just have maybe a handful left that are opening, and primarily they are childcare programs located in schools. And so so now the ministry has directed childcare to fully reopen, which means they can open to what their license capacity will allow. So our division is working very closely with all community partners to ensure that happens and to welcome families. In regards to expansion of spaces and everything else, that will continue as part of our regular business.
Thank you,
So-
Brenda.
So the smaller cohorts that were originally recommended as a part of the provincial order has been rescinded, and now the child care operators can go to full capacity as per what their license allows them.
Yes, effective September 1st, that change came into place.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Clark just asked the question that I was going to clarify in terms of additional spaces versus how many children and families will see increased capacity to, if they are now more comfortable opting back into childcare services, what those numbers are likely to be in Hamilton. So it's great news that that we're going to be able to support our service providers to get up to capacity. I know for many working families that childcare is the only way in which they can get back to work and move from and transition from, if they've been able to work from home, to move towards higher productivity in their work life by being able to access these childcare spaces. So it's definitely welcome news. It's definitely part of our economic recovery. It's part of our social recovery coming out of COVID. So it is good news. And I guess my fundamental follow-up question would be around early indications were that families weren't comfortable yet having children go into childcare services. And do these new protocols still enable the child care service providers to have smaller cohorts, but in more settings in order to meet their capacity? Or is this literally still working in the same physical footprint and having, the X number of children in that one space?
Thank you. Through you to the chair, I think the short answer is it depends. And I'm sorry, it depends on childcare operations because, again, some operate in homes, some operate in buildings that have various rooms. But I want to reassure councillors that we're working with every operator individually and supporting them in making good, sound, safe decisions that make sense for them and the families they're serving. And so we are supporting families in accessing licensed childcare, understanding what it means to enroll their children, answer any questions they may have through our regular communications. We're working with our communications to develop key messages consistent that supports families in understanding what this means. And even through our fee subsidy, we are not, if families are choosing not to return to childcare yet, we are putting that family on hold until they are ready to return. So our goal is to not have any, turn anyone away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Excellent. Thank you, Brenda. And of course, we voted on this item already. And of course, it passed. It's good news. Okay, we're going to go to 10.3. Okay, 10.3, may I have please have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor. Councillor Sam Morella and Councillor Nan. Is there any discussions? I see none. Okay. We will vote. You vote to approve the recommendation on the report. Please indicate your vote now. Okay, and it passed. We're going to go to notice of motions, item 12. 12.1, modular housing. Councillor Marola, please introduce your motion respecting modular housing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would love to take credit for this, but it wasn't my idea. It's actually Councillor Collins' initiative, and it's before you. But he would like to leave it as a notice of motion, in which he can attend the next meeting and discuss it in more depth. And I appreciate your time.
Okay, so we will then leave it as a notice of motion, and we're going to go to general information now. Item 13, 13.1, amendments to the outstanding business list. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the amendment to the outstanding business list? Councillor Jackson and Councillor Clark. Thank you. Is there any discussions? I see none, and we will have a e-vote. Please indicate now. Councilor Marula, be voted. Okay, and was carried. Okay, are there any general information or other business? Councillor Nan, please. Councillor Nan?
Thank you, through the chair, for the opportunity. I did want to just raise an issue under the purview of emergency and community services that has been emerging over the course of the latter part of the summer in Ward 3, and I would be curious to hear from some of my council colleagues if it might be occurring in your wards as well. But there's been an increased number of concerns being flagged by my office by Ward 3 residents of activity occurring in our adjacent parks in the neighborhood. Allegations of witnesses who have seen people selling alcohol to minors in our parks, seeing an increased activity around bullying and violence occurring among young people and to young people specifically. An increased number of concerns being raised both through social media on my channel in terms of my platforms on Facebook particularly, but also in neighborhood watch groups around overt racism and homophobia that both parents and children who are in our parks are unfortunately experiencing in terms of slurs, but also in terms of graffiti on our play structure during a time in which our play structures were not to be used. So I'm seeing a trend of increased crime and safety issues, and the concerns expressed by neighbors, particularly by parents and young adults, is what feels like a lack of resourcing of our younger adult population and youth in general. And I was wondering if I could take an opportunity within the time that we have on the agenda of this committee to just get clear through you, Chair, with staff about how and whom would be the appropriate staff team to work with in terms of addressing these complex issues, and primarily focusing in on the types of resources that might support our young people in the city at a time when the entire population is contending with, a whole new world where many people are feeling overburdened, as well as including our support services and our support social agencies who otherwise are becoming quite stretched in order to carry out their core business, let alone put together the types of gap fill support services that our youth population might be needing at this time. So if I could, through you to chair, through you, chair, to staff, inquire about that. And if I could get a point person to work with on these issues.
Would that General Manager Paul Johnson, can you answer that for me and who we contact?
So through the chair, Grace Mader and her team have been working along with the youth strategy, and they do have a youth team within their division. So I'll ask Grace if she wants to add anything right now. But obviously, my suggestion is talking to Grace, and she can work with you, the staff. But Grace, is there something more to add from a kind of youth strategy perspective or youth supports?
Through the chair, we'd be more than willing to follow up, Councillor Nan, directly with your office on that. I think what I know that we had intended on bringing our youth strategy forward, and then as a result of COVID and all of the implications in that, we've realized that we've got to basically go back to the drawing table. And I also know, so the other bit of information that I can share with you is that I know Councillor Partridge has been in touch on a couple of occasions about some concerns about a lack of focus for some youth in her award, and some of the challenges that she's been having. So maybe I can follow up directly with your office and we can talk about some next steps on it.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Clark. Councillor
Um,
Clark?
Thank you. I think Councillor Nan also asked for comments from her colleagues. I
Right.
can tell you that since COVID, there has been an increase, at least a perceptible increase, in vandalism, in vehicle break and enters, in graffiti, in my ward. And I know that we're still, as a city, we're still on par with last year in terms of the number of shootings that have occurred. And I think it's time that we have a conversation about some type of program and outreach for youth to dissuade them from getting involved with gangs and the drug business. I know that Calgary had created a program called YARD, its Youth at Risk Development Program, which has been very successful. And I know Chicago created a program called Operation Ceasefire, which was basically a wraparound program where the clergy and the leaders in the community were meeting with the youth and finding things for the youth to do and keeping them busy so that they weren't getting involved in the gangs that were perpetrating the crimes. So I'd be very keen on having that discussion with our staff in terms of what we can do as a city to create a program that, for all intents and purposes, helps the police in their dealings with the youth, but also our desire is to eliminate some of the violence that we're seeing that's coming from the gangs. So I'll reach out to Mr. Johnson separate from this meeting and have a discussion with him and see if there's something that I can bring forward, some motion that I can bring forward that would direct our staff and leaders in the community to come together to look at some type of programming. And I most certainly will keep Councillor Nan in the loop because I know that her ward has been experiencing a lot of these issues also.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I was wondering, can I pass the chair for a minute? Councillor
course.
Nan? I was wondering if we could get the nonprofit organizations that have these type of groups. Like I was thinking about Liberty for Youth. They do a fabulous job getting youth out of trouble. And I'm sure there's a lot more. So even if the staff gets involved with these organizations that have the program already, I think that would be great. I could think even City Kids. I was involved in City Kids as well. They do that with the younger group. And now they've expanded to the older group where they have all kinds of things they get them involved in. And so I was wondering if staff, maybe that would be a leeway to talk to them, if that would be good. So,
Looks
all
like
right. Thank you. Any other, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I can advise you, Madam Chair, that I did meet with the City Kids leader, Todd Bender,
Todd Bender,
Reverend
yes.
Bender.
Yes.
And we had a really good conversation about Operation Ceasefire. So he's very keen on working with our staff and other community groups. I think we need to, at some point, as Councillor Nan is talking about, begin that discussion. How do we bring these groups together? What kind of programming can we create that is, as we coin frequently, a made in Hamilton solution to resolve some of these issues? So I think we need to have a kind of a private conversation first, then draft some kind of motion to bring everyone together and start having those public dialogues in terms of how we can make some improvements overall. I think there's a lot of programs that are being very successful in Hamilton.
Yes,
But there's others that we can bring into the mix and just spread it across the entire city where we're having issues. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to, I guess, adjourn, but I want council to know, my colleagues, that in 15 minutes, we're going to have a council meeting So we'll give you 15 minutes leeway. All right, so let's e-vote for adjournment.
Madam Chair, can I get clarification? Do we sign out of this meeting through WebEx and sign in
Yes.
again?
Yes, we do. We sign
Okay.
out and come back in. Okay,
Thank
so you
you.
have 15 minutes.
Thank
All
you.
right. Can I have Councillor Marilla and Councillor Jackson to adjourn? Right? They agreed. Thank you. And we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay, thank you.